This is Hashtag History, episode 138. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah.
And my God, here we are again, nearing the end of another season.
Yee.
I would say that this season felt really different to me. It was
very,
yeah. It was a return to the podcast after our longest ever hiatus. It was my first season doing the podcast while having kids, which taught me a lot about time management. I still haven't learned anything, but it did teach me a lot. It was your first season pregnant and not getting to partake in cocktails.
Yeah.
I think I will always look back on this particular season fondly, though, despite the multiple audio mess ups and re-recordings of episodes.
Yeah.
We've received so much overwhelming support since returning to the podcast. We hear from all of you every single week about how much you missed us while we were gone and how happy you are to have us back. And I cannot even tell you what good that does to my soul.
Mm-hmm.
You all have made this return so special, and I thank you all so much for that.
Yeah, it's unfathomable to me sometimes to think about the level of support and just love y'all show for us.
Yes.
I'm getting weepy.
I am too, because the reason that we're continuing this podcast, one, we literally just talked about this today, is because it's time for you and I to hang out and talk, and we loved that.
Yeah.
But the other reason is because, I didn't know until we returned how much people actually missed us and listened to us. I honestly didn't know.
Yeah.
I was like, doesn't matter if we come back.
Yeah.
And so that's been really, really special. So even though I just screamed, you guys don't know, off air for 10 minutes before jumping in to this recording because my audio is messing up again, and this season has been plagued by audio issues.
Yeah.
I'm still really grateful that we're here and that we get to do this really fun thing together.
Yeah.
Now that we've both been mushy.
Yep.
Let's move on to something really not mushy at all.
Right.
This week, we will be discussing the Milgram Experiment, which was a series of psychological experiments conducted by psychologist Stanley Milgram, in which he was testing the blind obedience of a participant to an authority figure. I am confident that every one of our listeners has heard about these experiments. These were the experiments where one participant would serve in the role of a teacher while the other played a student. The teacher would ask the student a question, and if the student got the answer incorrect, the teacher was instructed to administer an electric shock to the student. Do these experiments sound familiar to you?
It's a vague concept that I've heard of, but I don't know any of the details.
Oh, so, great. Okay. Yeah. Well, then I'm really excited. With each incorrect answer, the shock levels were incrementally increased all the way from 15 volts to 450, which is a fatal level.
Oh,
yeah.
Bloopy.
Bloop, bleep, bleep. Yeah.
Bleep, bleep.
When you watch the video footage of these experiments, you can see that many of the teacher participants hesitate and even refuse to administer such intense shocks to the innocent student. But shockingly, no pun intended, Milgram would find that with the right amount of pressure applied to the teacher from an authoritative figure, every single participant was willing to go up to 300 volts, and a whopping 65% of the participants were willing to administer the maximum voltage level of 450. Milgram, whose Jewish parents had immigrated to the United States during the First World War, was particularly inspired by Nazi Germany and how so many members of the Nazi Party obeyed authority so blindly when they murdered hundreds of thousands of innocent Jews during the Holocaust. As was revealed during the Nuremberg trials, Nazi leader after Nazi leader professed that they only did what they did because they were following orders from authorities. The results of this test are pretty disturbing, to say the least. Lucky for us, they may not be true.
Yeah.
For one, the device used to inflict electric shock upon innocent participants wasn't actually real. And those innocent participants, they were members of Milgram's own staff.
Yeah.
But that's not even the most surprising revelations about the Milgram study to surface in more recent years. Australian psychologist Gina Perry has re-evaluated the experiment and found that much of the raw data does not reflect Milgram's final conclusion. In fact, that 65% number that we got earlier, the number of participants willing to blindly follow orders, is actually only based on a tiny fraction of those that ultimately participated in the test. over 700 people took part in the Milgram experiment, and yet Milgram's final results derive from 40 of those participants.
So he like purposefully cut stuff out to try to make data do what he wants it to do.
Yes. Isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, Leah, or our audience, isn't that like confirmation bias, right? Like you see, you're drawing conclusions that only match what you want them to reveal.
Yeah.
Additionally, Milgram's gauge of obedience was skewed. Even if a participant refused to inflict electric shock on another participant upwards of 20 times before they finally complied, Milgram documented this as blindly obeying.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. The problem with all of this is that Milgram's experiment is still so widely known, inaccurately so, and still referred to as factual. Mm-hmm. In fact, it is still taught in many psychology courses today. I think of it like our episode not too long ago about the bystander effect and Kitty Genevieve's.
Yep.
Genevieve's story is still taught in many psychology classes as being the standard or the example of the bystander effect, the psychological theory that one is less likely to help in a crisis if they believe others will step up. We dove into the full story in our episode 122.
And we got into some discussions about it.
We really did. That's one of actually my favorite episodes because we talked about several of our own experiences of having to step up and call the cops or decide not to call the cops.
Yeah.
Either way, with all the stuff that we discussed in that episode, we proved that it simply was not the case. That, what was revealed about the Kitty Genevieve's story initially was not true.
Yeah.
The bystander effect and the Milgram experiment have been accepted as fact and told and retold for decades, causing us humans to believe that we are actually shittier people than we really are.
Yep.
Which is saying a lot because people can be really shitty. They can be really shitty, but like a touch less shitty.
Right.
As you can tell, we have so very much to talk about today. I want to jump right into it, but not before, of course, jumping into this drinky drink.
Drinky drink, yeah.
Drinky drink. That smells so good.
It's going to be so good.
I can't wait.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Leah.
And this is Hashtag History,
the podcast for both history nerds and history haters alike,
where we dive into history's greatest stories of controversy, conspiracy, and corruption.
Thank you to Janae, who bought us this week's cocktail.
Oh, thank you, Janae. She's
Shout
such
out.
a huge supporter of the podcast.
Huge supporter. Her name is all over our Instagram. Love it. So this week's topic was once again kind of hard for me to find a cocktail. And I guess I should just stop saying that at this point.
Yeah, unless like our episode, I'm trying to think, like our episode is about Manhattan.
Right.
Right? Or something like
but
that.
We've already done a Manhattan.
Yeah,
so that would still be hard.
What about if I do an episode about Long Island?
Okay. I could get down with that. Yeah. So you might be surprised to hear there are no cocktails named after this topic. Shocker. No pun intended. Speaking of shocks, though, I thought instead I'd do a spin on the shock cocktail.
Okay.
For obvious reasons, right? So let's see how obedient this drink makes us after we have some of it, right?
Look at all the puns.
Okay, so I named this Leah's Whiskey Shocktail.
I love it.
I've been doing a lot of spin on cocktails
I've been loving
lately. That. Yeah, just because I need to make them work for me.
Yes. Yeah, you need to do whatever you can to make them work for you.
Right. So this cocktail contains equal parts bourbon and lemon juice. I feel like it might be a little too much lemon juice. We'll see once we taste it. And then a little bit of ginger syrup and crushed ice. Obviously, we'll put the actual amounts on our Instagram when we post about it. Before we drink, the original recipe was actually a vodka cocktail, pretty much like a lemon drop, kind of. But I wanted whiskey.
Whiskey?
Or faux whiskey.
Also, your faux whiskey is really, really good.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Like, I don't think I'd drink it straight, but in mixed drinks, it's really good.
Yeah.
It better be. It cost me a lot of money. So
it better be. Well, I'm really excited.
Yeah. Okay. Ready?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Woo. Definitely lemony.
Yeah. Holy shit, that's lemony.
I do like it because I like anything with whiskey and ginger.
Oh my God.
But
too much lemon.
A touch too much lemon.
Maybe do half the amount of lemon juice.
I would say it's shocking.
That's true.
Ooh, it shocked my mouth.
And my stomach.
And our stomachs in an hour.
Yeah, this is going to be really excellent for my heartburn.
It's going to be really good for the baby. The baby's going to be doing flip-flops.
Oh, yeah. It's good. It's just a little too lemony.
So I'm going to put it at like a 6.
6.
A 6.
Yeah, I'll do a 6 too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bring down the lemon.
Bring up the bourbon.
Yeah, bring down the lemon, up the bourbon. The real bourbon.
Real bourbon. Yep.
Okay, so where does one begin? I think before we can more or less debunk the Milgram experiment, we need to talk about it as it has been presented for the last several decades, beginning with Stanley Milgram and his motivations behind conducting an experiment like this. Milgram, born in New York City in 1933 to Jewish immigrant parents, was heavily influenced by the Holocaust at an early age. Following the Second World War, his family housed a number of his relatives who had survived the Holocaust, and he heard their horrendous, tragic stories. He was well aware that had his family not immigrated and had he not been born in the States, he could very well have died alongside many in his family in the gas chambers. He was so entrenched in the Holocaust and the way it affected his family that he even said in his bar mitzvah speech, quote, "So I find happiness in joining the ranks of Israel. The knowledge of the tragic suffering of my fellow Jews makes this an occasion to reflect upon the heritage of my people, which now becomes mine. I shall try to understand my people and do my best to share the responsibilities which history has placed upon all of us," unquote. I fully understand that without obviously being able to understand your family and your family's family and your friends friends being brutally murdered. I absolutely understand taking on that responsibility of reflection and understanding and burden. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Biographers that have studied Milgram have stated that he felt very much like he was in a no man's land and experienced to some degree survivor's guilt. He was very much affected by the Holocaust, but was not a direct survivor of the Holocaust. And so he felt very much both like an insider and outsider to his Jewish heritage.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be hard.
Milgram would go on to receive his bachelor's degree in political science from Queens College and later his PhD in social psychology from Harvard.
Okay, so he's got a pedigree there.
Definitely. He's smart. He's super smart. Mm-hmm. And that feeling that he had about his Jewish heritage, it would lead him to want to learn and understand everything he could about the Holocaust and about the Nazi regime. Milgram was particularly inspired by the Nuremberg trials, especially that of Adolf Eichmann, one of the largest orchestrators of the Holocaust. In fact, his trial began in Jerusalem only 3 months before the Milgram experiment began. The experiments began on August 7th, 1961, conducted in the basement of one of the buildings at Yale University. In each one of these experiments, there would be 3 participants. One, the teacher, which we discussed earlier, was a volunteer that would ask a series of questions and would be the one that would inflict the volts if the questions were answered incorrectly.
Okay.
2, the student, whom, as we also already discussed, was actually a member of Milgram's staff, unbeknownst to the teacher participant, that would answer these questions.
Okay.
And 3, the experimenter or person in charge of conducting the session.
The authority person.
The authority person. I'm so glad you said that because this person was dressed in a lab coat, which contributed to the idea that they were an authority figure.
Yeah.
Volunteers were paid $4.50 at the start of the experiment, the equivalent of close to $50 now. So can we just talk for a moment about inflation?
I don't want to.
No, I know we don't want to, but the fact that $4.50 in 1961 is nearly $50 today.
What the hell?
Like, this is something that people didn't tell me about having babies is how much money I would spend on fruit. Those kids, we spent $100 last Saturday on fruit.
On fruit alone?
On fruit alone. They've damn near cleared us out a week later of all of that fruit.
That's crazy.
It's good. It's happy. It's exciting. But my God, Inflation, help me out here. My children eat a full fruit salad every day, and they are 8 months old.
Yeah.
They either need to slow down or inflation needs to slow down. The experimenter would explain at the start of the session to the two participants what they were to expect from the experiment. They would explain that they were volunteering for an experiment that would study, quote, memory and learning, unquote, and to see what effect punishment may have on one's ability to memorize. The experimenter would then have each one of the participants pull a piece of paper that would determine if they were going to play the teacher or the student role. Unbeknownst to the actual volunteer, each slip of paper would actually say teacher on it, as the member of Milgram staff would lie and say that they had drawn the paper that said student on it.
Right.
The participants were then seated in a way that I would like for you to describe to our listening audience, Leah. And as always, all pictures mentioned in the episode can be found on our Instagram should you like to view them for yourself. This is one that I definitely think you'll want to view for yourself so you can really understand kind of the setup of each one of these experiments.
Okay. So it looks like there is there's everybody sitting at a desk.
Mm-hmm.
There's one person facing into the center of the room with a little chain connecting them or wire connecting them to someone who's facing not directly towards them, away from them, like 90 degrees facing away from them. And then there's a person who I'm assuming is the authority figure, whatever we wanted to call them, who's watching, looking in from the other direction.
Exactly.
Over the two of them.
Yep. And one thing you can kind of see in this picture, but not necessarily, there is a barrier between the teacher and student role, which I think is really important.
I think also the fact that they're not facing directly towards them.
So important.
Is going to become important.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
So as you can see here, the teacher and the experimenter, they go into the same room, whereas the student is in an adjacent room strapped to the chair. The teacher and student were able to communicate with one another, but were not able to see one another. It was explained to the participants that the teacher would ask the student a question, and if the student answered the question incorrectly, they would receive a range of shocks administered by the teacher. These shock levels ranged from 15 to 450 volts and were visibly labeled with words such as slight shock, intense shock, danger, severe shock, and at its peak, simply XXX. This sounds like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, right?
It really does.
The participant in the teacher role was clearly led to believe that they were inflicting real shocks upon the other participants. In fact, the teacher participant was even given a 45-volt shock themselves so that they could understand what it felt like for the other supposed volunteer.
Okay.
The teacher would then read off a series of questions and inflict increasing levels of shock to the student as the student answered the questions incorrectly. As previously mentioned, the student participant was actually a member of Milgram's staff, an actor, actually, who had previously recorded moans or grunts or even screams to be played as the shocks were administered. When the greatest voltage was administered, the actor would fall silent. Throughout the experiment, it was also common for the actor to bang on the glass that separated them from the teacher or to even express to them that they had a history of poor heart conditions.
Oh, wow. This is really fucked up.
It's really fucked up. We're going to be talking about the ethics not too long from now.
Yeah.
The person in the experimenter role would encourage the teacher to continue to ask the questions, to continue to inflict shock for the incorrect answers when they would begin to hesitate. The experimenter was given a script with language to pressure the teacher to continue. Leah, do you want to read what some of those prods were?
Yeah. So, please continue or please go on. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no choice. You must go on.
If necessary, the experimenter was also allowed to inform the teacher that any pain they were inflicting upon the student would not cause permanent physical damage.
Mm-hmm.
I think this right here leads perfectly to the idea of blind obedience that Milgram was attempting to prove.
Mm-hmm.
The person in the experimenter role was not giving gentle responses that allowed the teacher to feel as though they had a choice. They weren't saying, sure, go ahead and continue if you feel it is right. Mm-hmm. Or if you're comfortable, please carry on. No, it was straightforward commands telling the teacher that they had no choice but to continue the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
These series of verbal prods were read off to the teacher in this order that you just read them, Leah.
Mm-hmm.
So if the teacher only hesitated once, the experimenter would continue to read off just that first line, the please continue or please go on. And they would keep doing that each time they hesitated only once. Only if the teacher protested more than once would they move through the rest of the lines. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the experimenter made their way to the fourth prompt, that is when the experiment would be paused. Or in the cases in which the teacher kept on pushing, the experiment would be paused once the maximum amount of volts had been administered.
Okay.
It's pretty grim, right?
Yeah. It's just messed up.
It really is. And to make things even more grim, when Milgram published his findings from this experiment, he found that the majority of participants, a whopping 65%, were willing to inflict the maximum voltage on someone they believed was another innocent participant, despite pleas from that participant to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Milgram had polled some of his Yale students and colleagues prior to the experiments to see what they thought the end results would be. They believed that only 1 to 3% of participants would actually be willing to inflict the highest level of voltage.
Okay, which is probably more accurate when you're talking 700 people.
But we don't know that yet.
I know, sorry.
But yes, it is. That is a more accurate number in actuality.
Yeah.
Those involved in this poll, the ones that were saying they believed to be between like 1 and 3%,
Mm-hmm.
were particularly convinced of this because the sample group of participants were Americans.
Okay. And we're better than everyone.
Well, yeah, obviously. End episode now. We've really got things under control over here.
Totally. Nothing's going badly for us.
Oh my God. I just want to crumble into a ball of tears.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine, even though it's all on fire.
Yeah.
It was believed, though, by, these people that were being polled that Americans were more individualized and therefore would not comply in the uniform way that many Germans had in the Nazi regime.
Okay.
This made it all the more shocking when Milgram announced that his experiment proved that Americans were no different than the Nazis, who had murdered hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Okay, so let's talk about what exactly Milgram's results revealed. Of the 40 participants, several of them showed signs of nervousness, such as sweating, biting their lips or nails, groaning, and so on, with 14 of them actually breaking into nervous laughter or smiles.
Yikes.
Every one of the 40 participants paused the experiment at some point due to hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one point of, okay. Though most would continue after being persuaded to do so by the experimenter. Every one of the 40 participants increased the voltage to at least 300 volts. Of those that refused to administer the greatest levels of shock, these participants simply refused and left. They did not demand that the experiment be discontinued so that further experiments could not be conducted, nor did they request a check on the health and safety of the student participant.
Yeah.
And ultimately, once again, of the 40 participants, 26 of them, so 65% or 2/3, were willing to continue to the highest voltage level of 450. In Milgram's words, his findings revealed that, quote, stark authority was pitted against the subject's strongest moral imperatives against hurting others, and with the subject's ears ringing with screams of the victims, authority won more often than not. Ordinary people, simply doing their jobs, and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agenda in a terrible, destructive process. Moreover, even when the destructive effects of their work became patently clear, they are asked to carry out actions incompatible with fundamental standard of morality. Relatively few people have the resources needed to resist authority, unquote. One thing I really love about you, Leah, is your sense of morality, because you make that face with like our bystander episode, you instantly were like, that's not true. Or the Hartford circus fire. I remember that one too. Like, that's not true.
Yeah.
You have a better sense of morality than I do.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, you definitely do. Before we can discuss what I teased at the beginning, the bit about how more recent research has revealed that Milgram may not have been entirely truthful with his findings, we have to talk about two of the major criticisms of this experiment. Mm-hmm. The first one is, of course, the ethics of it. Is it ethical in scientific research to drive a participant to the point of tears? to the point of sweating, to the point of believing that they had inflicted actual physical harm on another human being.
Yeah.
It has been argued by many modern scientists that it was not ethical to place this level of emotional stress on participants in the course of an experiment.
Did they ever explain to them afterwards?
Thank you for asking. That is part of scientific research, is that you should always receive a debriefing at the end of it. And that debriefing would be things like, the shocks weren't real shocks. That
Don't
person
worry,
is,
you didn't hurt someone. You didn't kill someone.
That person's not actually a volunteer, they're a member of my staff, blah, blah, blah. It has been found in more recent years that most of the people that participate in this experiment were not debriefed properly. Even Milgram's insistence that this experiment proved Nazi compliance during World War II has been called into question, and this here is perhaps the second largest criticism in relation to this experiment. The greatest differences between his experiment and the horrendous crimes inflicted upon Jews during the World War are as follows. For one, the participants of this experiment could not see the other participant that they were inflicting pain upon. You mentioned that earlier. They were not motivated by race or bias. They could not physically see the pain that they were causing their victim, which is, of course, not true of the Nazis.
Right.
Secondly, the participants in this experiment were reminded that they were not inflicting permanent physical damage to the other participant. The Nazis, on the other hand, of course, knew the damage they were causing.
Yeah.
There are other major differences, such as the fact that the participants in this experiment were under a time crunch, I guess you would call it, in which they were only given an hour to make up their minds about what pain they were and were not willing to inflict. Whereas the Holocaust was a years-long massacre, and those involved in it had ample opportunity to change their minds. All fair points.
Yeah.
Hey there. Are you long on curiosity but short on time? Want to learn about history but can't make it through hours of dialogue? Then I hope you join me, Alicia, as I cover historical topics and the time it takes you to enjoy a cup of coffee. Each week on my show, Civics and Coffee, I chat about United States history in short, bite-sized episodes. You can find Civics and Coffee on your favorite podcasting app or through my website at www.civicsandcoffee.com. I can't wait to share a cup of coffee with you. See you soon.
Alas, let's talk about the true findings of the Milgram experiment.
Cannot wait.
Cannot wait. This is what was revealed when the raw data was actually examined. Perhaps the greatest critic of the Milgram experiment, Australian psychologist Gina Perry, who published in 2012, Behind the Shock Machine, The Untold Story of the Notorious Milgram Psychology Experiments. That's a long book title.
It is.
She closely analyzed the raw data from Milgram's experiment and found it to reflect stark differences from the results he had originally published. For one, it was found that Milgram had only pooled data from 40 participants when there had, in fact, been over 700 involved.
I have so much to say about this, but I'll let you finish.
I want to hear what you have to say, but also I might answer it very shortly, or also you'll be even angrier within a couple paragraphs and you'll have even more to say.
Great.
This was because Stanley Milgram actually conducted more than 20 different experiments with varying scenarios leading to varying results. Interesting. There are too many of these variations for us to go through every single one of them, but I'll name a few and you'll see right away why some of these factors would obviously produce different results.
Yeah.
One variation of Milgram's experiment included the experimenter role actually being pulled away by a phone call early on in the experiment. This experimenter would then be replaced by an average-looking person not wearing a lab coat, and this alone resulted in a decrease in the number of participants willing to inflict the highest levels of voltage. I can see that, right? Okay. Like, they're not in a uniform anymore. They look like me coming in saying, like, please continue.
Yeah. Who's Joe Schmo?
Similarly, one variation had the experimenter in a different room speaking to the teacher from a telephone as opposed to, being in that same space with them, not physically seeing the experimenter and having them, for lack of a better phrase, breathing demands down your neck. Researchers saw a decrease in the number of participants willing to inflict the highest levels of voltage.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like having an emotional conversation with someone via email versus face to face, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Or even like at work when I have students calling into my office upset about something. I mean, like even over the phone, I can still sense and feel and have empathy for when they're upset, but nothing compared to what I feel when they're in front of me.
Crying and
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another variation involved the teacher role actually having to physically place the student's hand down onto a shock plate to administer the shocks. This too decreased the number of participants willing to inflict the highest levels of voltage.
Well, that would put them in the same room.
It does.
So, yeah.
They could see
They'd
them.
have to physically see what's going on.
See them and touch them to inflict the pain.
Force them. Yeah.
There was a variation in which there were multiple teacher roles and only one actually being a volunteer, but that volunteer was led to believe that others were also volunteers and not actors. Some of these other teachers would refuse to comply with the experimenters' demands to continue, which would ultimately persuade the volunteer to also not continue with the test. That is
obviously.
Yeah, it's obvious.
Like if somebody else is standing up first, people are much more likely to follow suit.
Social pressures.
Yeah.
Even changing the location of the experiments had an effect on the number of participants willing to follow through with it. When the experiment was conducted in a rundown building versus at Yale University, this alone led to a decrease in the number of participants willing to inflict the highest levels of voltage.
You know, all of this is very interesting data that probably, while not giving the final decisive information that he was hoping for, is very interesting.
Definitely.
And shows levels of intricacy about the human mind and how we move through life under authority.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting. He should have included this.
Yes. I think, exactly what you said. He was so focused. He had such an agenda, because he was motivated emotionally.
Well, what's interesting though, is that his agenda, it seems weird to me, as he's a Jewish, child of immigrants.
Yeah.
You would think that he would want to prove that no level of authority should or could force people to do this. These were all just horrible people who were killing Jewish people. And yet his findings actually kind of were like, oops, these Nazis were, they're just, it supports their argument that they were just following authority.
I see what you're saying, but I kind of see it the other way, where it's like the Holocaust is so unbelievable and so unreasonable.
You just want to make it make sense.
You want to make it make sense.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of it. But I also 1000% agree with you that like seeing the varying results based on the varying factors is really important data, right? Like it shows, and I mean, this speaks more to human nature than anything else, that we all react differently in different scenarios with varying factors.
Yeah.
With variations such as this, the rates of obedience actually ranged from 0 to 92.5%.
Wow.
But this is not what Milgram published. Rather than revealing that he had conducted all of these different experiments, he led the public to believe that he had only conducted one experiment with 40 participants in a way that, as Yes Magazine writes, quote, either de-emphasized or actively suppressed evidence that ran contrary to his desired conclusions, unquote.
I also want to note that, and even if he really did only do an experiment with 40 participants, that is such a small number for such a huge, like,
definitely
for people to take as seriously as they have.
Definitely.
Like, I feel like that's too small of a sample size.
Yeah. If he had, published that he had conducted this experiment on 700 people and come to those same conclusions, that's way more moving and,
totally
believable.
Yeah. 40?
Right. Even within this alleged singular experiment Milgram conducted, there were variations found, particularly in the way the experimenters persuaded the teachers. Remember earlier, Leah, how you read off that list of phrases that experimenters were allowed to recite to encourage the teachers to continue the experiment?
Yeah.
When studying the raw data, which included tape recordings of the actual sessions, Perry found that the experimenters sometimes went off script to be even more persuasive and coercive. Milgram's publication stated that everything was standardized, but this was simply not the case.
No.
Even the degree to which Milgram classified obedience could be called into question when examining the raw data. To what degree is it considered obedience? When they comply after the first request? Is it still considered obedience when they comply after the 20th request? Milgram thought so and deemed any acceptance of request, even if after 20 persuasive and coercive attempts, to be notated as blind obedience in his final findings.
That's odd.
Mm-hmm. What's more odd to me, though, is that this is still taught, and still believed to be factual.
Yeah. That's what's so unbelievable to me.
We, on our podcast alone, which is not a psychology podcast, but we've covered now 2 psychological responses and studies and experiments that have been false. How many more are out there?
I know that we all think to believe to be true. Yeah.
Scary. An article written for Discover magazine says it perfectly, I think. It says, quote, "In the 50 years since publication of Milgram's first journal article, the obedience research continues to be cited as evidence of an enduring psychological truth. Inside all of us is a Nazi concentration camp guard waiting to be called into service. Yet my archival research and examination of primary sources and that of other scholars contradicts this claim. Milgram himself was privately aware of the methodological weaknesses of his research and struggled with many of the issues about the validity of experiments and their generalizability beyond the lab. Privately, Milgram reflected that his work was more art than science and described himself as a hopeful poet," unquote.
Ew, don't present yourself as a scientist and then call yourself a poet.
A hopeful poet at that.
Ew.
Yuck. I think it's really important that we have this episode, that we talk in depth about this experiment that has become a social norm and accepted truth that, like the writer said, inside all of us is a Nazi concentration camp guard. Because of the public acceptance that this experiment was conducted ethically and thoroughly and that the data presented was real and authentic, we have been led to believe that the vast majority of people will willingly comply with orders, even to the extent of harming another. And now that I just said that whole phrase out loud, it just made me realize that this experiment has kind of caused us to, I hate to even say the words, I don't know if I want to say it, to almost justify the Holocaust, to explain the Holocaust.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at, is it's almost like he's saying it's okay that the Nazis did this. Yeah. We all would have done it.
Yeah.
And that seems so weird to me.
I can see his motivations for that, though, because, again, you just want to make it make sense. Why would so many humans do this to other humans?
Yeah, because there are horrible, horrible humans out there, but I think the vast majority of us aren't as horrible as he might have led us all to believe. We also have to take into account, like you mentioned earlier, we're talking like a years-long period of time where all these different factors are affecting people, maybe making them more desensitized to this sort of thing, putting pressures that most people are not under.
That's actually a great point. I had said that the fact that the Holocaust was years long provided more opportunity to change your mind.
Right. But I think also more of a setting to desensitize you or to just... I think desensitize is the best word.
I
just
do too.
Go along with it.
And normalize.
Normalize. Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right.
The human body and mind is an incredible, incredible thing that can adapt to incredible, incredible things.
In good and really, really bad ways.
Yes. Yeah.
I think when looking at the raw data and understanding the numerous variances, we can see that this was simply not the case, right? That there's a Nazi concentration camp guard in all of us.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand, and also really encouraging when we consider humanity.
Yeah.
Yuck. Ugh. I feel better and worse.
I know.
Which is how I end every one of our damn episodes. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of #History.
We will share the picture that we discussed on the episode to our Instagram, and all sources used to put together the episode can be found on our website at #history-pod.com.
Subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you use, share about us with your family and friends, and then give us a rate and review.
And be sure to check us out on Instagram at #history_podcast.
And come join us over on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can help support our books and booze supply. You also get access to some behind-the-scenes content and automatic 15% off all merchandise, and we mail you cards and stickers.
Thanks.
Bye. Make it make sense, though.
It doesn't.
Okay. I get. Yeah. Once you accept it doesn't make sense,
then we can just live with the consequences.
Guess so. Okay. Even if a participant refused to inflict electronic shock on electronic.
I was like, I'm gonna clear my throat, get the phlegm out. That last drink made me incredibly phlegmy. I ended up, it was like a real drink for the first time in ever, and I talked so much that I only took a couple sips out of it. Okay.
Jewish immigrant.
Immigrants.
Say Jewish and then immigrant right after it. It's kind of hard. Oh my God. It's not the liquor, it's the lemon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get the harmonies right over Zoom.